Welcome to Cover Book Meet. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. Our guest today is a bit of a departure from the novelists we normally interview. Carol Anderheggen is a poet, and her poetry reflects her life, which was unfortunately not a happy one. As her biographical information explains, she was made a ward of the state in 1943, placed into foster care at age 3. Her mentally unstable mother lived in a trailer, had a nervous breakdown as a result of losing her child, and was institutionalized for 18 years. And she wouldn't see her birth dad until 25 years after being given up. She bounced around foster homes, had no sense of family due to the trauma she suffered, finally adopted at age of 7. She survived her traumatic childhood, only to have confront a diagnosis of breast cancer at age 50 and a recurrence of PTSD during the recent pandemic lockdown. Fortunately, Carol is a fighter, a survivor, and a resilient woman. She has worked as a school librarian media specialist for nearly 3 decades, as an active disaster relief volunteer with the American Red Cross, and served as docent at Robert Frost's home in Franconia, New Hampshire. She's been telling her story through her published poetry over the last 4 decades. She is here today to talk about her 2 poetry books, Writing Down Cancer and Born Child, which explore the most significant moments in her life. We're very pleased to welcome Carol Anderheggen. Good morning.
Well, I am very pleased to be here.
I often note that in these interviews that because I talk to novelists primarily, the reader can't assume that the views expressed by characters in those novels express those of the author. But poetry, while it can be descriptive and narrative like that, is often about the poet themselves, and that's the case here. Was this hard to write some of this stuff, or was it cathartic?
It's cathartic for me because I was told when I was adopted, because I was in an orphanage briefly, that's how they found me. I was told to forget my first 8 years, to say nothing about my first 8 years. And my new parents were told, do not ask her questions. That silenced me in a very profound and disabling way. And I found a book of poetry in there. They didn't have that many books, but I found a book of poetry. And I found my feelings in poetry. I found words that matched what I was feeling that I wasn't allowed to speak about. So that's why it became a way of communicating for me. And not hard. And definitely I write to resolve.
But this resolution also can help other people.
I like to think that I'm able to communicate, that I'm able to say something about my life that's universal and that somebody else may be able to relate to.
I'm going to circle back just for a second about that book of poetry that found. Was there a particular poem or particular poet that influenced you greatly at the early days?
Well, it was a book. It's called Paul Graves' Golden Treasury of English Poetry, British poetry. And I actually have the leather-bound copy of it. I had it leather-bound years ago. I think the famous poets, Shakespeare, Keats, Yeats, those poems, those more lyrical kind of poetry. The other influence for me was the King James version of the Bible.
Beautiful language.
The King James has got the most beautiful language you could find in English next to Shakespeare.
Yeah, that's fascinating because I see hints of that in your poetry. So we all reflect our influences, though, indeed.
Thank you.
I'm going to let's first about writing down cancer, because that is a tough subject, and you managed to come at it from multiple directions in that, and yet keep focused. How do you do that?
Well, again, it was cathartic. It was for what I was feeling. Like the second poem in that collection is called The Art of Telling, in which I describe very simply, but I think fairly profoundly, what it felt like to be told you have cancer. The biopsy was malignant. And literally talking about the doctor holding my hand and laying me down. He actually did that because I was about to pass out, I think. Yeah. And how I interpreted that is, he held my hand and gently cradled my heart.
That is beautiful. Do you have a section of that book you'd like to read?
Well, I'd love to read that particular poem, The Art of Telling.
Please.
He was, I was with him as a patient for years. And his last couple of years ago, he retired, and we were both in tears at the end of that day. This is called The Art of Telling. You took my hand and tenderly told me it was malignant. this mass, this tugging sensation I felt last fall. Cells gone awry, doing some crazy dance, out of step, out of sync, my breasts the dance floor. You held my back and gently laid me down and held my hand while we discussed how to stop this crazy music, this dance gone awry. Yes, you held both hands and thereby gently cradled my heart.
Love that last line. That is it. It rounds it up. It brings it back and pulls it together.
Thank you.
And that's a gift because there are a lot of really good novelists who can't write good endings. But as
There's some good poets who can't write good endings
I
either.
didn't,
I just helped a friend of mine today. We poets, if you're smart, you find somebody you can work with to edit and workshop. And she had a wonderful poem, but it wasn't, I could feel and see the poem, but it wasn't there on the page. And I really rewrote it and brought it to that kind of ending that had an impact. I like a good opening and a good ending.
you do, and I found out throughout all of these poems. Of course, different people are going to pick up different things as our own life experiences to find the things that reflect with us on that. But I will have to say, and I'll briefly mention this, that my late wife had the same situation as you do, and I think one of the startling things you also do a section about the prosthesis, which I remember very, very much, and how odd that was. So yeah, you captured that.
It was part of the process, and each of those poems is a state of feeling that I went through. My anger, my resignation, introducing the prosthesis to my partner.
Yeah.
I never was so amazed and thankful for science as when I saw a prosthesis.
Yeah.
And I could see where I was going, and that while I would be one-breasted, I would have this assistant prosthesis. It meant a great deal to me.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff. And if you have not been through that with your partner, if you're a guy watching this, it's traumatic too. It has its own.
Sure, it is. Absolutely. But men are part of the process. They're affected by breast cancer. Some men can get breast cancer, but certainly in a family, the whole family's affected by any form of cancer.
Yes, it ripples out, touching everybody around you, friends and relatives alike. So, let me switch gears and go to Born Child. And one of the things I know about poetry is because it is so, most cases, other than you get the Vedic sagas and whatnot, they're short, and so every period, every punctuation mark, every word is very carefully chosen. And I'm intrigued why you put the hyphen between born and child.
Say
the hyphen between born and child.
Oh, yes. Well, I did think about that a lot, but I liked the way it looked. I liked the separation of the idea of child with child being a child and born being a special category of child, so to speak. It came about because when I was about 6 and I was in a foster home, and I learned the facts of life, I started asking people, are you a born child? Because I did not believe that I was a born child.
Wow.
It's probably at that age, if my mother had been in a lineup of, women, I would not have been able to pick her out.
Wow.
She was a brilliant, intelligent woman, college educated in the 20s, very wealthy family, would not help her, would not take me, would not help her when she had a breakdown when the state put me in an orphanage, and would not sponsor her out 18 years later.
Wow.
The wealthy family with small hearts, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the sensations that came through with reading Born Child was a sense of disconnect.
Interesting.
Yeah, between not being able to talk about your first 8 years, for instance.
A lot was asked of me. In older adoptions, I think a lot is asked of the child because you have two loyalties in a way. I had a loyalty as hard as that early life was. That was me. That was my experience, my life, and I was required to drop it, to forget it, and you can't forget that. You can't. And and it wasn't fair of the state to say to these new parents, don't ask her any questions. This was back in 1948, and they felt, well, she's got adopted, now that's it, and we're all
Yeah.
set.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that things are done a little differently now.
Yeah. Which
I
reminds me.
wonder,
Yeah.
I wonder if you'd mind if I showed you the cover of this book.
Oh, please, please, please share that with our people. Yeah.
See, there's a little girl standing half in the shade and half in the sunlight, and of course that's me at about age 12.
Yeah. That's
Taken by my adopted mother. And I love what the publisher, Finishing Line Press, did with it. It's a picture I sent them. They slightly askewed it, as you can see. It's not
yes.
straight on. And I think that's just a brilliant artistic, creative way to present that picture.
Right. Well,
I was thrilled when I saw that.
I have to say, not only does a poet have to have a good ear, you have to have a good eye as well. And I think that is all part of your artistic expression.
Yeah, yeah. You do,
I,
you see a lot. You see a
yeah,
lot, you feel a lot as a poet.
I would like, if you don't mind, to have you read on being adopted,
Oh, okay, sure.
because there's a line in that again I think is the closing really has an interesting impact.
All right, just give me a moment to find it.
Sure.
Four, page 4. I'm being adopted. I have moved among many lives, here, there, elsewhere. A Navy captain and his wife surviving Pearl Harbor, picking me up in an orphanage, explaining mirages to me as we sped along a Florida state highway to meet my new grandmother. The orphanage was no mirage. She was busy at the sewing machine, making sunsuits for her new and only grandchild, me. What I knew of my foster mother, I bestowed on this sewing lady. Gray hair, blue eyes, and the light of liquid love in her eyes. There was no liquid love elsewhere, otherwise. Forget your first 8 years, I was told. Do not ask her questions. Buy a home for swear the Navy life, they were told. Recipes for disaster doled out by the well-intentioned.
That's the last line. It sums up in a very different way. It's not a positive. It's a this was not good, did not work out well.
Did not work out well. They did not, the state blindsided them by saying, now you have to buy a house and settle down. They had traveled together in their Navy deployments. And now this new mother had to stay put with me, and the father had to go off to the sea duties. Thank heavens the new grandmother moved up from Florida into this beautiful little, she took this one room house and added to it and put the beautiful walls on it and was next door. I had one absolutely wonderful foster mother who I had started to bond with when I was 6. She's the one I was plucked from and dropped into an orphanage. And that was a heartbreak because I had started to bond. I had started to feel safe. I had started to feel love. And that just, but a little bit of that came through with this new grandmother.
Good.
Yeah.
You painted the picture of her making the sundress for her only new grandchild, you.
Yeah.
That's love.
She was a wonderful seamstress. She had all kinds of things already made for me. Yeah.
That is great.
I even have a picture of my 8th grade graduation dress. She had made, in my dress. But by then I'm in 8th grade. I'm a grouchy little girl.
Everybody goes through a rough time at that stage.
I worked 28 years with 12-year-olds.
Yeah, man. I can't help because what I do, I take notes as I read, and then you have kind of this one set of where you kind of count down the loss of parents, which is an interesting concept for me.
Are you referring to a particular poem?
Yeah, just a
3
second.
parents down and 1 to go?
Yep. And
that's a long poem, but it's one of my favorites. I can tell you what motivated me.
Yeah, please.
One day I decided, okay, I had 1 parent left. My adopted mother was in a nursing home. And a lot of this, this could never have been published while any of them were alive. I would not do that.
Yeah.
I could not do that. But I thought, I wonder if I can write a poem, 4 parts, each stanza would be, and in order, first father, first mother, second. And I would describe an essential interaction with that parent that would describe that relationship. That poem came out almost fully formed, which is rare. I think you probably have heard writers say to you, 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Every once in a while, you get a poem that comes out, bingo. And that one did. That one absolutely did. But again, because of that last stanza, where I talk about the mother that's still alive, I couldn't publish it. But I love that poem because I think it really sums up my experience with these parents of mine.
Well, and again, that's one of the ones that I really felt like you were communicating with me, because it's in fact, there's an interesting concept. Some people have this, what should I call it, spread, this diffusion in which accessibility is at one end and art is at the other end. And some people say, well, it can't, if you can understand it easily, it isn't art.
Oh
And
dear.
I think that's just the opposite. I think that
Right.
art that clearly speaks to you as art. And I think that's what you have done here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I believe it's communication, and it doesn't have to be flowery and profuse, and uh, using the right words at the right time, and a sense of rhythm, and well, with poetry, sense of rhythm, a sense of movement. Right. Right.
And well, I pick up lines that resonated with me. I'm going to throw a few of those at you because
Okay.
I found it fascinating. From the poem called Transformation, the safety of the dreams. That's an interesting
Mm,
concept. I've run into it occasionally among other novelists, talking about, we can't deal with reality, so we hide in the safety of our dreams.
right. Right. It doesn't sound familiar to me, but I'll believe you. Oh, transitions or
It's
transformations?
transitions, actually. I
Okay, it was used
mispronounced
to
it.
be. It's interesting you said that though, because I think it used to be transformations. It went through a lot of different,
Hmm.
yeah. Well, there is absolutely safety in dreams.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. You can you can symbolize. I think for me anyway, as a poet, I work with symbols a lot, and I have to remember in real life that I can't operate always on symbols.
No.
I can get myself in trouble with people when I'm operating on
Well,
symbols.
symbols are convenient abstractions, and sometimes
Right.
people are much more complicated than the symbol that we create for them and
Right.
say, I'm not in that little
Right.
box. I have to really, probably my favorite of all of them is The Gift of the Cove, which is a
Oh,
wonderfully comfortable sentiment. I felt kind of bathed and supported after reading that one. Could you throw
oh,
that one
wonderful.
in? Could you read that one for me too?
Oh, sure. My older daughter is very much like me.
Mm.
Um, we had a very, very contentious growing up.
Uh,
In fact, I was with her yesterday, and I've learned you listen, Carol. You just sit and listen.
yeah,
You don't have a conversation with her.
yeah.
It doesn't work that way. So as long as I sit and listen, it works. Now, The Gift of the Cove, let's find it. Okay, page 20. Yes, I like the ending of this too. Wow, you're giving me quite a bit of reading here, and I appreciate
Well, I,
it.
I
Okay,
I enjoyed it, and I think people will enjoy it as well.
it's in three sections, and
Mm.
section one is called the Refuge. An untended, littered with battered boats. Oh, excuse me, an untended shore littered with battered boats, cast-off buoys, netting of long lost usefulness. Haphazard seaweed decorations clings securely to the objects beneath, saying the sea owns all that is lost, all that is abandoned. Rotting seaweed scents this shore. Despite the decay and the rot, I hide here every spring afternoon after school, away from martinis and Manhattans, hide among scattered empty beer bottles and shells, empty of the lives that made them. An adolescent life, as rife with loss as this beach, with nothing to savor or save. Two, the beachcomber. At 7, my fair haired daughter became a beachcomber, patient, sharp eyed hunter, hunched over, resting from sun-glittered sand, those small shards of pottery, of glass, green, blue, brown, and the precious, infrequent lavender. I watch, unaffected by her concentration, by her joy. Calling her neon plastic pail home, she washed her treasures carefully, saving each one hidden from sight. Now, in her tiny city apartment, they nest in an old wooden bowl shaped like the boats once littering that shore. 3. The return. The lights on the bridge, like a double-stranded necklace, seem to honor my return to the pine-paneled cottage by the bay, a home now that never was. I explore the cove, though I need no refuge. Someone cleaned it up. Boats, buoys, nets, gone, as if someone rationalized it, like a life finally understood. No more seaweed rot senseless air. My daughter invites me into her private world of beachcombing. Startled by her cove's beauty, I let her teach me to be a beachcomber. As gentle competitors, we jostle shoulder to shoulder, snatching what treasures the sand reveals. Most highly prized the broken pieces of everyday china with little flowers and vines on them. Back at the cottage, we compare and trade pieces. We become intimates, awash in the patina of the summer sunset. Our angry passions no longer entwine, choking us. This, a sufficient gift from a sufficient God.
Again, beautifully summed up, and I just felt bathed in a warm feeling when I read that particular poem.
Well, that is, thank you, because that is what I experienced. And being in this cottage with the sun, when the sun comes in this cottage and sets with that glow, these walls reverberate with something more than just sun on vine.
Yeah.
And we were, looking at our pieces, and that sun was washing us. And evidently you've gotten the feeling from my writing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Good.
What do you hope that people take away from it when they close the book, either one of them, from your poet?
What? Pardon me.
What do you hope that they take away from
away
you?
from it?
Yeah.
That you can survive, and you can survive well. That poetry is a vehicle for expressing your feelings. I don't know, I have to kind of modify that with, if you can write and express your feelings. To sit down and express your feelings is not necessarily a poem,
Yeah.
but it can be if you have the talent or the gift or the ability to do it.
Yeah.
It can be. But the surviving and surviving well, especially with my experience from the lockdown, I thought everything was fine. And I started sleepwalking, and I started sleep eating. I gained enough weight. I had ended up with a hernia.
Oh my
I
goodness.
finally one night in the depths of despair said, what is going on here? Because to be frank, I've had a lot of therapy. I've had to have a lot of therapy. I was a very, very angry, wounded young woman. But I thought, I got my life straightened out. I'm in my 70s, and one word, I said, what's going on here? And one word came back: orphanage. And I realized it was replicating emotionally and psychologically my orphanage experience.
The isolation of
The
it.
isolation. Even though I had neighbors across the street, my daughter came in, we had driveway tea. She'd stay out in the driveway, and I talked to her through the window in the kitchen. It was that deep. And there were evidently some obviously unresolved, very, very deep feelings that needed to be attended to. And it's classic PTSD. So I hightailed it to a new therapist who's trained in PTSD to, unlock some of this. I was really stunned that happened to me, but that's why I've wanted to do these presentations, why I so appreciate your having me on and letting me talk about this. I want to say to people, reach out, don't suffer alone. Talk to a family, talk to a friend, find somebody to talk to. I know
So,
for a lot of people, it's not easy to do that. They want to hide it. And there's nothing wrong with having a problem in your mind or in your heart.
that's a great message to wind up on. You've been very generous with your time today. I do want to mention you mentioned websites, the books, the
Yes,
publishers.
yes, I
Anything you
do.
want to plug here?
Uh, the publisher of both books is Finishing Line Press. I have a link on my website. My website is my name I was given when I was born, Carol May Ray, CarolMaeray.com. If you were to Google born child or writing down cancer, you're going to find my name and find my website that way easily.
Okay.
I have a new book in mind. For me, you have to have a vision. And
Yes.
I have a vision. My new title, working title, is Visits Here, There, and Elsewhere, based on the belief that we're all just visiting here. We're
Uh,
just visiting this planet. Every single living creature is just visiting this planet. In fact, I woke up this morning with a poem I was writing in my head, which I had to get down. If I can get the first couple of lines, then
yeah.
I can leave it and go back to it. But if I don't get those first couple of lines, it can be lost forever.
Like the person from Porlock who invaded Coleridge and lost the last lines of Xanadu. Anyway, you have again. You have been great. The two books are highly recommended. Writing Down Murder and Born Child with a hyphen. And we have been really pleased to talk with you. Thanks so much, Carol, for your time
Thank
today.
you for having me on, and I appreciate your appreciation of my work. Thank you.